Hello, good morning, good afternoon to all our guests, viewers, and listeners from wherever it is that you're dialing in from. Um, Today's a very special day. I think it's a holiday in many parts of the world. I hope you're all having a good day, and thanks for taking the time to come and join us this morning or afternoon. Today, the panel that we have is a very exciting one, and we're going to be discussing SME financing for trade, the immediate challenges and future opportunities. Certainly, as we see it on this panel, and as our panelists view it. So, without a further ado, I will allow our three panelists to introduce themselves, and then we can jump straight into it. Just a bit of a housekeeping note. So, towards the end of the session, I will open up for some questions. So feel free to shoot questions across to us. I will try and pick them up and pose them to the panelists, and look forward to your input on that. So Nassourou, maybe with yourself, and then Ian, and then Farah. Please do introduce yourselves before we dive into it.
Okay, thank you, Tawanda. So my name is Nassourou Aminou. I'm a FCI Regional Manager for Africa. So FCI is a large organization, non-profit organization. We have 400 members in Africa, mostly banks and factoring company. We have an initiative under Africa chapter with Africa Exim Bank to develop and to promote factoring in Africa. We know that factoring is like an innovative products to support Africa trade, free African trade. So yeah, and I think we have a lot of challenges and a lot of opportunity to develop that and to promote SMEs in Africa. Thank you.
Great, and Ian?
Thank you, Tawanda. Good morning, everybody. My name is Ian Sayers. I'm the Senior Advisor for Access to Financing and Investment at the International Trade Centre in Geneva. And we are the United Nations agency responsible for sustainable trade and enterprise development, with a special focus on SMEs, which is the subject of this discussion, and women and young entrepreneurs, particularly the internationalization of SMEs. Right now, we're managing a number of projects in the East African region, particularly the EU-funded Markup project, and the United Kingdom Trade Partnerships program, and some others for our She Trades Invest program too. So that means we're quite heavily involved with supporting through technical assistance and other activities of SME exporters across the region. Thanks. Oh, and Eid Mubarak to all our colleagues in this who are celebrating Eid today.
Thanks so much, Ian. And Farah.
Yes, good morning, everyone. My name is Rasata Rafaravavitafika, but you can call me Farah. I'm a Director of Economic Expansion at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Madagascar. So our mission is to bring our support to SMEs, local companies in Madagascar, to help them find business partners abroad, to find also investors, and to help them penetrate new markets. And thank you, GTR, for having me today.
Fantastic. And just very quickly myself, so I'm Tawanda Mudimbu. I'm COO at Asoko Insight. We are a Africa-focused data and research firm, and have recently, in the last 12 months, been very heavily involved in basically digital origination and allowing corporates and SMEs to find financing from different pools of capital through our digital solutions. So leading into the conversation, and Nassourou, I might come to you first, just to help and very briefly, help us understand the lay of the land as it is at the moment. A brief overview of the current environment, particularly the last 12 to 15 months have been challenging with COVID, and some of the key challenges that you are seeing in the market from your standpoint. Nassourou, I think you are on mute. Thanks. Yeah.
Yes, thank you for it. So indeed, most African countries have a large numbers of SMEs relative to the size of their economy. So these are almost exclusively microfinance, and SMEs represent 90% of the private company in the continent. However, this preponderance of number is not yet reflected on their weight. The speed of the COVID, we see a lot of challenges that SMEs have in terms of the limited access to finance, because there's a lack of information to provide to banks to enable them to have a financing line. There's a lack of also collateral, because they need to prove that they are able to guarantee the trade. So we can also recall some of the non-payment issues because of the lack of business. There is no also credit insurance. That is most of the challenges we have in the market.
Mm-hmm. And when you say lack of information, just to zoom in there very quickly, what kind of information specifically do you see as being a particular hurdle to allowing corporates and SMEs to tap into those pools of capital and particularly the right type of funding that they need for their businesses?
Yeah, because most of the SMEs don't have a reliable financial, or they don't even have it. So that's why we need to know what is the if this is registers, if they're doing business, if they have bank account, and then if they are able to, the bank are able to assess them. Then this is a small company, they even don't have accounting. So that's why this is lack of this kind of information. It's very difficult for some banks to provide them funding.
Yeah, and so this problem isn't necessarily a thing of a lack of information so much as the companies themselves sometimes don't even have the requisite financials, for example, in place to allow the financiers to make the decisions that they need to.
You know, it's depending of the appetite of the risk of the for funders, for the banks. Mm-hmm. They want to be a retail or corporate or micro enterprise. So in the different cases, we have to put in place kind of a process, kind of for assessment to say, okay, we need to take the risk on that. We have an appetite of risk of those SMEs, those micro enterprise. So then they are able to take the risk and to fund those companies. Because for now, maybe we don't need a lot of information like before. If it's already, we know that this company is registered, this company do a transaction, this company have a relation with the owner, provide some service and goods. So the bank want to track all the transactions before to allow them to give a guarantee or to funding.
Sure, and I'll come back to that later on in the conversation, because I think there are some quite interesting initiatives that we've seen, and certainly from Asoko's side, we've been involved in over the last kind of 12 to 24 months that I know you've been involved in as well, and we can come back to that and speak about some of the kind of the practical solutions that we're starting to see mushroom in the market. But if I go to Ian next, maybe, and maybe start to speak more about solutions, and how are the companies themselves, as well as the financiers in the market, responding to some of these challenges. I think they're fairly well-known challenges in the markets. They've been talked about, ad nauseum sometimes, and certainly are a lot more acute with the COVID-19 crisis. What kind of technologies or approaches or even partnerships are you seeing in the market that you think are being built to tackle some of these challenges?
Thank you, Tawanda. Look, first of all, I think let's just have a quick look at where we see the status of the enterprises that we're working with. And since last year, ITC has been following quite closely the situation of the enterprises we work with. And there's more than 2,400 of them in the 5 East African countries where we're active at the moment, plus many more in Madagascar and around the region. And we surveyed more than 70 commercial banks in the region in November last year with the Trade Finance Pulse Check. So out of that, what we're seeing is, we have established smaller exporters who we're working with, and some of them have survived all sorts of difficult situations for 6, 7, 10 years. They have consistent relations with their banks, but now they're almost finding themselves back at being the startup stage because their savings have been used up and they're in a relatively weak position. But nonetheless, they're in this curious situation of having strong orders coming in. Some of them are trying to pivot to new markets with all that involves. And at the same time, they don't have the cash to take on new staff, lease containers, get new inspection services for the new markets, packaging, labeling, all these kind of things that they need to pay for in advance. So one of the big challenges that we see right now is that the enterprises are in a bit of a weak position when it comes to satisfying conditions for investors or for long-term financing. And they desperately need short-term financing, less than 1 year, working capital, trade-related, pre-shipment financing, sales order financing, this kind of thing. So that's one area where we're focusing our energy. And in particular, when we look at that, there's a bit of an anomaly in the market that some of our listeners may be aware of, and that comes from the need for the international banks to follow the Basel regulatory structure, which for blanket across all SMEs requires them to, for that category of lending, requires them to ask for more than 125% collateral on the net value of the loan, risk premiums for SMEs, the 10% or above. And so this really makes short-term financing very difficult and sometimes impossible for good SMEs, good exporters. And what we're trying to do about that, we put our heads together across the industry with our colleagues in Afreximbank, with the DFIs and with the commercial banks. And we're looking at what we call portfolio guarantees that can work through the commercial banks to reduce their collateral, to de-risk their collateral requirements, their capital collateral requirements, and also to cut the interest rates down to something around 10%. We're not quite there yet. We've got a bit of work to do. So this is one potential solution on the horizon. And Nassourou, another one, you mentioned information. And I think there's two key areas of information which are quite crucial at the moment. One is actually enterprises being able to see and know and understand all the different financing and business development support services that are available to them in their country. And that's not often easy. So we've developed something called the Financing Gateway, which is a platform going live this month and next month across 5 countries, which will enable enterprises to see all of the facilities available to them, filter them and match them to their needs. And it's a free service. And then, Nassourou, perhaps something you might be able to comment on. We found that a lot of the banks, they've been working mainly with the larger exporters and importers this past year. And so many of them have not kept their AML and KYC CFT records for the smaller enterprises up to date. There's been not much call for it, and they have, frankly, their resources have been better employed elsewhere. So this has led to another challenge for SME exporters, because as soon as they try to get into a new market and their bank tries to get a correspondence going with the bank in the buyer's import country, then there's a challenge there, because immediately they want to know, hey, when did you last do your KYC and AML, et cetera, on this client of yours? So, Nassourou, I think Afreximbank is looking to address that through the Mwanza system, right?
Yes, indeed. Afreximbank launched 2 initiatives to just to facilitate the African Free Trade Agreement. Like they put in place a kind of Pan-African e-payment settlement system called PAPS. This will go along to speed up the transaction between African countries, just to cut need for transaction pass through the hard currency and to reduce the risk of systemic collapse. It's also they put in place like MANSA. MANSA system is to verify how to update KYC and AML. So this is a AML check. This is a participating to bank to help to promote factoring in Africa. So we have also the initiative for Africa chapter for factoring. So to promote cross-border factoring, there's around the world we have FCI have 400 members in Africa, but we only have 40 members in Africa. So those 40 members, there's maybe less, 80% of the transaction is done by South Africa. So there is no correspondent in West Africa, East Africa. So that's why we need to work on it to help banks to have more correspondent in each country with the free African trade. They are able to do cross-border transactions.
Great, thanks. So there's a few things in there that's been packed into that question. So there's obviously the regulatory pressures that banks and the regulatory realities that banks have to contend with. And Ian talked about some of the solutions there, but I want to highlight, I think, 3 initiatives that have been mentioned here, and maybe after this session we can send out some information around them, because I think this is quite critical, particularly for any corporates or SMEs that are on this call. You mentioned there's the financing gateway in, which will provide a resource for companies to know what options they actually have available to them. I think that's a very powerful tool that can bring a bit more transparency and information into the hands of corporates of where they should be going. PAPS, which is Afreximbank's initiative around payments, and again, I think that's a crucial bit in the puzzle that Afreximbank is looking to address, facilitating the ease of payments and the cost of payment, as opposed to the cross currency challenges that we see and that are prevalent across the continent, where we're always having to go into hard currency, then come back into local currency, and all the costs associated with that. So that's another powerful thing. And then finally, MANSA, which is the KYC and AML platform. In fact, at Asoko, we have been involved with a lot of the data gathering around this. And I can say that one of the big challenges here really is one, getting the word out there that there is this facility available for corporates to use. They can come forward, submit their information on that platform, and it definitely allows their company to be in a much better position to be able to engage with financiers as and when they are seeking funding. So I think those are 3 very powerful initiatives that we can send a bit more information out after this session. So having set that up, I want to come to Farah. You've heard a bit about the lay of the land, some of the challenges, some of the regulatory challenges that we see, and I guess the mismatch or the asymmetry of information across the markets. All compounded by the prevailing market conditions given COVID-19. It's always good to have someone from a central authority, from a government, on a panel like this, because you have a critical role to play in these markets, where there's a facilitator of trade and helping build the ecosystem that is critical to seeing this trade not only start but grow and be sustainable going forward. Your input, please, on what you're seeing from governments across the continent, and particularly in East Africa. What policies that governments are putting into place, particularly in the context of the free trade agreement, that you think will help to create this conducive environment for companies to trade more, and not only trade more within the locations that they are, but cross-border with other countries out there across the African continent.
Yes, thank you, Tawanda. Well, as we may know, several ongoing projects or there are many projects to support the financing of small businesses in East Africa. We can take the example of Kenya, for example. We have this SME Solutions Center. In Tanzania, we have other programs such as export processing zones. In Mauritius, there is a very interesting ecosystem of financing SMEs, which has been built by government and private sector also. And in Madagascar, there are many programs that I would like to share with you. And as we know, Madagascar is an island country, and we don't have the same reality as other East African countries, which are directly linked to the continent. In Madagascar, SMEs account for 29% of value added in the private sector and 31% of job creation in the same sector. We can notice that despite their crucial role in the development of the country, Malagasy SMEs have very limited access to financing. So the government of Madagascar redesigned the existing legal and institutional framework within which SMEs are working. So a series of initiatives are being implemented to improve the business climate and support SMEs. Which include short-term programs and longer-term programs. And one of the most important area of intervention is improving access to financing. I can take the example of what the Economic Development Board of Madagascar is doing right now. Their main objective is to building capacity for SMEs, because we have mentioned that there is this issue of bureaucratic hassles and difficulties establishing eligibility for SMEs who are applying for loans. So EDBM is starting many programs in order to provide the best quality services for SMEs here in Madagascar. We have a one-stop shop and also which is the main channel to get credible, to get quality information for our SMEs. The idea here is to give and to provide the finest quality services for SMEs. So this comprehensive one-stop source of information is helping to improve the level of performance of our local businesses. We know that while applying for an operating loan or an investment credit, applications are selected on the basis of a lot of criteria, such as clarity of a project, sustainability of a project, capacity to generate jobs, etc. So the Economic Development Board of Madagascar has a set of kind of programs directed to SMEs to help them find the best ways to find financing, but also to be able to give these guarantees to banks in order to get the appropriate funding. We also have.
Yeah. Sorry, can I just and sorry to come in there. A question that comes to mind when you're speaking is, how much coordination is there, or how much do you speak to counterparts in other countries? There's a lot of these initiatives that we see very well thought out and well intentioned in countries, across the region. How much of that gets lifted to kind of a regional block level, if you like, and a sharing of ideas of what's worked in one country and another, or even a coordination, across countries? Is there a lot of that? Are those conversations happening? And more importantly, is there anything tangible coming out of those types of conversations?
Yes. Thank you for this very useful question, of course, because we have this idea of implementing what is called economic diplomacy, and we at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, or one of the main entities that are in charge of implementing this economic diplomacy, which is quite innovative, because the idea here is to really find the best manners and best solutions to help our SMEs find partners abroad, but also partners in the region, which is the most important thing, because we want to partner with the rest of the world, but we don't take the opportunity to partner with our brother countries and sister countries. So what we do is that we are trying to find new economic partners and new economic partnerships. And we do it through IORA, Indian Ocean Commission. We do it also through SADC, which has a very interesting program also in terms of promoting the private sector. So we are really trying to open new perspectives for our SMEs, which are accustomed to to European markets, for example. So we tell them that, hey, there are many opportunities to grab at the continental level, the regional level. That is what we're doing now. Yes.
Thanks so much for that, and that's interesting to note. You mentioned something earlier as well around capacity building, and maybe this is a question for Nassourou and Ian. So, what would you think are crucial, if you like, capacity builders or capacity building initiatives that will facilitate or at least help with access to financing for trade, particularly across East Africa? Just from my side, I'm thinking already things like at a corporate level, at a company level, there's technical issues that companies have to address and confront themselves. Things such as making sure your books are in order, making sure you've got governance systems in those companies, all of these things that are going to help you attract capital to your companies. Is there anything that you're seeing, maybe Ian, if I come to you first, around these issues that are crucial for these SMEs?
Oh, for sure. Look, it's in effect our bread and butter. ITC, our Access to Finance team, does a lot of capacity building. Well, let's call it reinforcing and extending the work of what we term business development support services. Some of you call them BSOs, business support organizations, but similar things. And this is really the whole network of different service providers, from legal and accounting and all these people who, many of them, focus on helping SMEs or smaller enterprises. Now, this is one strata, if you like, a business that really needs to get going and needs a lot of help, as you say. And now, thankfully, there are a lot of technical tools coming onto the market to help digitize the records of these companies to a certain extent, and make the process of collecting and transmitting and checking the validity and the currency of the documentation, making that process a lot easier. But one thing we shouldn't forget is that these business development support services, those which are not state funded, do need financing, because they're not going to have a viable business if they spread themselves amongst the really smaller enterprises, of which there are many thousands, okay, who equally need help, advice, and information on how to make their enterprises better and more appealing for getting the financing they need, even if it's from community financing providers, credit unions and SACCOs and people like that. So this is another area we're working a lot in, But there we have a different approach. On one side, with the SME exporters, we have something we call a boot camp, two-stage approach for bringing enterprises up to a level, first of all, for short-term financing, pre-qualifying them, or at least preparing them for pre-qualification for short-term or trade-related financing. And then a second stage for those that are attractive enough for investment or for longer-term financing, we help them prepare pitches and proposals. But then on the other side, you've got all the upstream providers, the small farmers, the community workers, handloom, leather products manufacturers, all these kind of guys who are working away and are crucial for the economy to get going. But they need a lot of help. So I see the challenge, and Farah, you might want to talk about this as well. I see the challenge there in how do you actually reach all of those thousands of smaller entrepreneurs? And we've had some ideas about how to do it. Financial literacy, financial education, that kind of thing. But that's certainly not the end of the story.
Nassourou, do you have anything to add to that?
Yes, indeed. That's for me, for us. We think, for example, trade receivable finance like factoring is a key point. Is a innovative tools to fund SMEs. So that's why Africa Exim Bank and FCI, we launched an initiative called Africa Chapter. So to support banks, banks and factoring companies, and also even SMEs to look at the solution to help them to have a facility like factoring, who is more flexible than the traditional facilities like overdraft, like LC, like so on. So we have put in place like 5 pillar, like financial intervention. We're working for the legal and regulatory framework. We do awareness and capacity building. Actually, we have a grant to support many banks in terms of the capacity building. We realize there's a lack of knowledge on factoring. It's quite new. And then all this initiative is to support banks to do cross-border factoring, to work on the open account transaction with import factoring, and who's allowed SMEs to have more opportunity to work in the different countries. And also they want also some banks to involve on factoring supply chain program. For example, if we have large company, we have a lot of small company, we need to put in place kind of program to allow them to have more funding. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks for that. So I want to bring in some of our audience who are starting to shoot questions to the panel, and thanks so much for that. I've got them streaming in front of me, and one of the themes I'm going to try and bundle together some of the themes that I'm seeing here, that we can get through some of these questions in the last kind of 15 minutes that we have. One of the things that's standing out in a lot of these questions is this issue of how do international banks, well-intentioned international banks looking to support SME or sectors across East Africa, how can they get involved easier and quicker in some of the more critical value chains, for example? That's one question. And to kind of double click on that, another question that then has come up is, on the ground, a lot of SMEs either don't have bank accounts, or even where they do have bank accounts, have got a very patchy history. How can, what needs to be done basically to marry those two realities, where you've got the companies on the ground with the funding requirements, maybe haven't been part of the financial system for as they don't have a long history in the financial system. You've got maybe international banks who do sit in pools of capital that want to assist, and there's that gap. How do you marry those two worlds? And sitting right in the middle is obviously the local banks. So maybe if I come to Ian or to Rafa, sorry, to Farah, if you have any input on that particular question, how do we solve for that kind of challenge?
Yes, thank you, Tawanda. I think that the first thing to do is, well, as I'm speaking on behalf of the government, from a governmental perspective, I can say that the first thing to do, and what we are doing right now, is to direct the funding programs to specific needs, which means directly helping SMEs to find business partners, directing the funding programs that are granted to the government to meet these specific needs of the SMEs. But as you pointed out, the main challenge is that on the one hand, we have banks that require more loan repayment guarantees. And on the other hand, we have companies that cannot provide enough credible documentation to obtain financing. And in Madagascar, for example, we have a lot of SMEs, a lot of entrepreneurs that are not willing to put their money into banks. They keep their money, and they even keep it under the mattress at home. So there is this challenge of how to make them, how to raise awareness within the private sector, because on the bank side, the risk is still high. The risk remains high because the basic conditions are not met. So the government is there to kind of reassure our SMEs that they can have access to loan, to credit, if they can meet some requirements. And there are many programs to do that. For the second question, I would just like to share a project that is ongoing here in Madagascar. There is what we call the Fiharina project, which is a national program of a state, whose main objective is to give both technical and financial support to Malagasy startups and entrepreneurs who want to succeed and expand their activities. So through this program, many young people are given the opportunity to start their own business and borrow from approximately $50 to $50,000 to finance their projects. We also have what we call green ownership title, which is a kind of ownership title which is given to the startups, but mainly farmers and people who are working in the agricultural field. So the main idea is to grant the best agricultural projects a way of financing. And at the end of the program, the people, the beneficiaries, can build their own house and the granted land. So the loans are repayable within 36 months, and the land is returned to the project owner. And the Malagasy state is granting 1,000 green property titles in each region. So at the end of the program, there will be 22,000 such titles to farmers. Yes, so these are some examples I wanted to share with you. Yeah.
Great, thanks so much for that. And those are interesting initiatives. Ian, did you have something coming there?
Yeah, just a couple of points. Look, we work with a number of the commercial banks, advising, guiding, trying to help them in a way structure their outreach for smaller entrepreneurs, for SME exporters, because it's not easy for them. You know, they're used to dealing with larger clients, and all of a sudden you have to, you need a really different approach and different procedures. In some countries, of course, it's better to have women advisors meeting with women advisors, all those kind of aspects. So I would suggest the corporate banks, the Pan-African banks, can improve their outreach to organizations like ours, organizations that have direct contact with enterprises and enterprise associations and other trade and investment support institutions in countries. But also to perhaps take a lesson from the community finance providers and the MFIs. These guys are not looking for assets. They're not applying traditional credit scoring methods. They're focusing on the transaction records that they can find. And you can do that through third parties and others. And they're finding the ability to loan to lend money to entrepreneurs who don't have the rest of the prerequisites that a bank normally requires. And we've seen the success of this in Ant and WeChat Pay and with the Chinese institutions who work in this way. And now more with like DHL using its logistics records as a basis for evaluating the performance of enterprises that don't have other assets that they can evaluate easily.
Yeah. So it seems to be an issue here that from both sides there has to be an appreciation and a willingness to change essentially, and to try to bring different approaches to the market from the SME and from the company side. There's a bit of a mentality shift, and that's actually one of the questions that I have in front of me of how do you actually help companies shift their mentality. And I think a lot of that has already been covered through some of these capacity building initiatives, through governments coming in and providing certain certain guarantees around the lending to these smaller companies and the ecosystems. All of these kind of things will help to build the confidence in the actual financial system, as well as from the financiers themselves, approaching these problems with open eyes, and trying new approaches to actually trying to distribute this money to the companies that so desperately need it. I want to come to one final question. We've got 4 minutes left, and I think this is a very interesting one, where and it's something that we've not touched on yet on this panel, obviously given the time constraints. But the question is very simply: does the panel agree that confidence is key to finance for SMEs and beyond, to SMEs and beyond, and therefore strong collateral management with appropriate technology, in addition to the right contractual terms, can assist to growth and lending? I think it's two things stick out from that question to me: is the technology and some of the solutions that we're starting to see to come to the market using technology and leveraging technology to help to get this funding through. And then the final one, which is interesting, and maybe Nassourou, you might have a take on this, is contractual terms. Are we seeing kind of the legal frameworks and the contracts that are being put in front of companies evolving quickly enough to cater for the realities of the situations that they are in? We've touched a bit about it in terms of the lack of history, lack of credit history, etc. Are the contracts and the contractual terms that are in the market at the moment, supportive enough for companies that do need this lending?
Okay, yeah, it's my side. I think technology and digital is an opportunity to help to resolve the gap of the lack of information. This is enabled to collect financial information on SMEs. We need also a payment repository to track the behavior of payment. We see in Africa a lot of credit bureau in some countries like Kenya, like South Africa, like Ghana, who already have credit bureau. That is very, very important. So we are working, for example, in our side to build factoring law. So, for example, some of countries already adopted in Egypt, in West Africa, in 8 countries. They are working in Kenya for the factoring law. So we need also to put in place kind of the delay of payment term that most of the most of the buyers have to respect that, because SMEs don't wait to be paid at 120 days. They need to be paid right now or 30 days maximum. So this is kind of thing we think things are moving in Africa. So we hopefully in the next couple of years we will spread it in the different countries.
Fantastic. This has been a rich conversation. I know this could spin off in multiple directions. We've got 1 minute left. Panel. I'd like to thank our panelists here today. Ian, sorry, did you have one final point you wanted to make?
Very quickly. One Trade Africa is coming. Number of agencies, participant number of governments, a lot of sharing of good ideas from different parts of Africa. OHADA contractual law, for example, standards. These things are going to happen. This is a real motivating factor, or should be, for enterprises across the continent to really change their mindset and to go with the flow, as we would say. Thank
Fantastic. I think that's a very positive note to close up on. Thank you so much for the panelists for taking the time and your insights.
Tawanda, please.
Yeah, sure. If we're still live, carry on.
Oh yes, just wanted to tell our participants that I have a PowerPoint presentations that I can share with them if they want to learn more about this ecosystem of financing SMEs in Madagascar, and they can contact me through the GTR platform also to request a copy of this presentation. Thank you.
Great, thanks so much, Farah. And Nassourou, any last words from yourself?
Yeah, I'm okay. So I think we say everything. So yeah, for example, for the COVID and to rebuild SMEs we need to look at what happening in Europe, for example, to put a national program for supply chain finance that is really support some SMEs, or also with the state guarantee to support to protect business and to make business become stay resilient, to move on this difficult situation.
Okay. Unfortunately, our time has run out, and I know we've got a lot of questions coming in. What I will do is that I'll pick up these questions and hopefully be able to respond directly, individually after the session. Thank you so much for listening in. Have a great day ahead. And again, to the panelists, really enjoy this conversation and look forward to continuing it off this panel. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.